I had 3 minutes before my children came downstairs and the woman at my door destroyed everything I'd built. My hand shook just enough to make the doorknob slip as I opened it wider. The evening air felt too cold for May, like winter refusing to surrender. Around me, my home hummed with the low frequency of normalcy, Emma's piano drifting from upstairs, Tyler's video game explosions from the den, the smell of dinner I'd started before the doorbell rang. Outside, Mrs. Peterson was watering her garden with that casual interest that meant she was absolutely watching. But in here, everything was perfect, too perfect, suffocating under the weight of maintaining it all. I stood in my doorway like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. The woman on my porch looked younger than I expected. Mid-20s, dark hair pulled into a careful ponytail, a sundress that screamed I'm not a threat. Her hand rested on her stomach, a gesture so deliberate it felt rehearsed, fingers splayed protectively over fabric that showed no evidence of the pregnancy she was about to claim. Behind her, James's BMW sat in our driveway, back early for once from the Riverside project that had been consuming him. Through the window, I could see his silhouette in his home office, probably reviewing blueprints, completely unaware that our life was about to detonate. Mrs. Morrison, the woman said, her voice carrying practiced sympathy. I'm Olivia. I need to talk to you about your husband. She looked like someone who'd rehearsed this moment. Who'd thought about her outfit, her posture, the exact words that would land like precision strikes. She was. 3 minutes ago, I'd been a wife who ignored warning signs because acknowledging them meant choosing action over comfortable denial. Now I was a wife watching those warning signs materialize into a woman on my doorstep with words that would confirm every fear I'd been refusing to name. I'm pregnant, Olivia said, and her hand moved to her stomach again, the gesture so calculated I almost laughed. James is the father. The words should have felt like an explosion. Instead, they felt like the final piece of a puzzle I'd been refusing to assemble, late nights, phone calls taken in other rooms, the distance in his eyes when I asked about his day. Upstairs, Emma's piano stopped mid-phrase. Mom, her voice called down. Who's at the door? I looked at the woman claiming to carry my husband's child, at Mrs. Peterson's not-so-subtle surveillance, at the life I'd spent 15 years building brick by careful brick. And I stepped outside, closing the door behind me with the quiet finality of sealing a tomb. You have 2 minutes, I said. Start talking. Because in 120 seconds, my daughter would come downstairs. My son would wander into the foyer looking for snacks. My husband would emerge from his office wondering who'd rung the doorbell. And I needed to know exactly how much of my marriage was real before I had to decide what to tell them. The woman smiled, small, sad, perfectly practiced. James and I met at a construction site 18 months ago. But I was barely listening. Because I'd just seen something that didn't fit. The timestamp on the photo she was holding up as proof showed a date I recognized. The day of our anniversary dinner. The night James had been with me at that restaurant downtown, celebrating 15 years with champagne and promises about forever. Either this woman was lying about the affair, or something much worse than infidelity was happening. And I had less than 90 seconds left to figure out which. Olivia's evidence spilled across my porch like a carefully curated exhibit of betrayal. Text messages on her phone, intimate and damning. Can't wait to see you tonight. You make me feel alive again. Rachel doesn't understand me the way you do. All from James's number, time-stamped over the past 18 months. Hotel receipts from the Riverside Inn, the same hotel near his construction site. 6 different dates, always a Friday when he'd claimed to be working late on inspections. Photos. James and Olivia at a coffee shop, laughing. James and Olivia walking through what looked like a park, his hand on her lower back. James and Olivia in what was clearly a hotel room, the kind of intimate photograph that left nothing to imagination. "I didn't want to do this," Olivia said, her voice breaking in exactly the right places. "But I can't keep lying. The baby deserves to know its father. You deserve to know the truth." My hands were shaking too badly to hold the phone she kept thrusting at me. The messages looked real. The photos looked real. Even the guilty, apologetic expression on her face looked real. "How long?" I heard myself ask. 18 months. Since he broke ground on the Riverside project. I was working at the planning office, processing permits. He asked me to dinner to discuss zoning issues. She touched her stomach again, that rehearsed gesture. It just happened. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Emma coming downstairs. "Leave," I said, my voice strangled. "Give me your number. I'll call you tomorrow." "Mrs. Morrison, I'm so sorry." "Leave. Now." She pressed a business card into my hand and retreated to a modest sedan parked down the street. I watched her drive away, then turned to find Emma in the doorway. "Who was that?" "Someone from Dad's work. Go finish your practice." Inside, I found James in his office exactly where I'd expected, surrounded by blueprints and coffee cups and the comfortable chaos of a man who had no idea his life was ending. "Who was at the door?" he asked without looking up. I threw the business card on his desk. "Olivia Hartley. She says you've been having an affair. She says she's pregnant. She has photos, James. Text messages. Hotel receipts. 18 months of evidence that you've been sleeping with someone half my age." The color drained from his face. He stared at the card like it might explode. Rachel, I don't know who that is." "She had photos of you together. Messages from your phone." "That's impossible." He stood, panic making his movements jerky. "I've never seen that woman before in my life. I swear to God, Rachel, I don't know her." "Then explain the messages. Explain the hotel receipts from the Riverside Inn every Friday for the past 6 months." "I've never been to the Riverside Inn. I work late at the site, you know that." He grabbed his phone, scrolling frantically. "Look at my messages. There's nothing. No Olivia, no affair, nothing." I looked. His message history showed exactly what he'd claimed: work conversations, texts to me, group chats about the kids' schools. Nothing incriminating. "She showed me your number. Your messages. Then they're fake. Rachel, please, you have to believe me. I don't know who that woman is or why she's saying these things, but I have never cheated on you." His panic looked real. His confusion looked genuine. But so had Olivia's grief, her reluctance, her carefully documented evidence. One of them was lying. And I had no idea which one. "Get out," I said quietly. "Rachel. Get out of this office. Sleep in the guest room. Don't talk to the kids. Don't talk to me. Not until I figure out what the hell is happening." He left, looking destroyed, and I sat alone in his office, staring at a business card for a woman who claimed to be pregnant with my husband's child. The evidence said affair. The timeline said impossible. And somewhere between those two truths was an answer that would either save my marriage or end it. I just had to figure out which before Olivia, whoever she really was, destroyed my family trying to prove her version was real. I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table at 3 a.m., examining every piece of evidence Olivia had shown me through screenshots I'd managed to capture before she left. The text messages first. I pulled up our phone records online, cross-referencing dates and times. James's number appeared repeatedly in Olivia's supposed screenshots, but our actual phone logs showed something different. Those same timestamps matched calls to contractors, texts to me, nothing remotely romantic. Either Olivia had fabricated the messages, or James had a second phone I didn't know about. I moved to the photos. Zoomed in on details I'd missed in the shock of the moment. The coffee shop photo looked candid, James laughing, Olivia beside him. But something nagged at me about his outfit. That navy suit with the thin pinstripe. I'd loved that suit. I'd also donated it to Goodwill 2 years ago after James spilled paint thinner on it during our kitchen renovation. The timestamp on the photo said 6 months ago. I pulled up our credit card statements, searching for the Riverside in charges. Found them, 6 Friday nights, exactly as Olivia claimed. But the amounts were wrong. Too low for a room. The right amount for dinner at their restaurant. Then I found something that made my blood freeze. One of the hotel receipts Olivia had shown me was dated March 15th. I remembered March 15th. Our 15th anniversary. We'd been in Boston for a marketing conference I'd been invited to speak at. James had come with me. We'd celebrated at a restaurant overlooking the harbor, spent the weekend in a hotel neither of us could really afford. I had the photos on my phone to prove it, James and me at dinner, the Boston skyline behind us, timestamped March 15th at 8:47 p.m. The same night he'd allegedly been at the Riverside Inn with Olivia. Something was very wrong with her story. But that didn't mean James was telling the truth either. I went to his office at 4 a.m., started going through his files. If he was hiding something, an affair, a second phone, a secret life, there would be evidence. Credit card statements I didn't know about. Receipts tucked away. Something. What I found was worse than an affair. Buried in a locked drawer I'd never seen him open, behind files marked Riverside Project, I found a folder labeled Hartley, Confidential. Inside were documents I didn't understand at first. OSHA inspection reports. Safety violation notices. Emails between James and someone named Robert Hartley, arguing about scaffolding reinforcement, cost overruns, deadline pressure. Then a death certificate. Robert Hartley. Died 5 years ago. Construction accident at the Prescott building site. Cause of death, fall from inadequate scaffolding. There was a settlement agreement. 6 figures paid to Catherine Hartley, Robert's widow, in exchange for her signature on an NDA. And a note in James's handwriting, Inspector confirmed to approve. RH concerns addressed. Move forward. Dated 3 days before Robert Hartley fell to his death. I sat there as dawn light crept through the office window, holding evidence that my husband had possibly cut corners that killed a man, and realized why a woman named Olivia Hartley might show up at my door with fabricated proof of an affair. She wasn't trying to expose James's infidelity. She was trying to destroy him the way he destroyed her family. And I had no idea if James deserved it or not. Upstairs, I heard James's alarm go off in the guest room. Heard him moving around, probably wondering if I'd calmed down enough to talk. He had no idea I'd just found his real secret. The affair was a lie. But the dead man in his locked drawer? That might be the truth he'd been hiding for 5 years. And Olivia, whoever she really was, had known exactly which weapon would make me start digging for it. I found Marcus Webb through a college friend who'd gone through a messy divorce. He's expensive but thorough, she'd said. And he doesn't judge. I needed someone who wouldn't judge. Webb's office was in a converted warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and suspiciously high-end equipment for a private investigator. He listened to my story without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a tablet. "So you think the affair is fabricated," he said when I finished. "And you think it's connected to this?" He tapped the photo I'd brought of Robert Hartley's death certificate. "I think a woman showed up at my house claiming to be my husband's pregnant mistress, but she had evidence with timestamps that don't match reality. And I think her last name matches the dead man in my husband's confidential files. You want me to find out who she really is? I want you to find out everything." It took Webb 3 days. He called me on a Thursday afternoon while I was sitting in my car outside Emma's piano lesson, still avoiding going home. "Olivia Hartley doesn't exist. No social security number, no employment history, no digital footprint before 18 months ago. And Melissa Hartley exists. Age 26. Daughter of Robert Hartley, the man who died at your husband's construction site. She graduated from NYU with a degree in graphic design 2 years ago. Currently lives in an apartment in Bridgeport under her real name." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Graphic design. She could fake text messages. Could fake a lot of things. The woman knows Photoshop, database manipulation, basic coding. She could create a pretty convincing digital trail if she wanted to. "Why?" "That," Webb said, "you'll have to ask her yourself." "But Rachel?" "Be careful. Her father died at a worksite your husband managed. She blames him. And people looking for revenge don't always stop at reputation destruction. I found Melissa's apartment that evening. She answered on the second knock, no surprise in her eyes when she saw me. "Mrs. Morrison. I wondered when you'd figure it out. Your name is Melissa. Your father was Robert Hartley. He died 5 years ago at the Prescott Building site." "Yes." She stepped back, letting me enter a small studio apartment with one wall covered in photos, documents, news clippings, all about her father's death. "Your husband killed him. I'm returning the favor by killing his reputation." I stared at the wall. Crime scene photos. The accident report. OSHA violation notices. Emails between Robert and James, arguments about safety concerns and cost overruns. "Tell me what happened," I said. Melissa pulled down a folder, handed it to me. "My father was James's business partner on the Prescott Building. They were behind schedule, over budget. Dad wanted to halt construction, retrofit the scaffolding. Said it wasn't safe. James refused. Said they'd lose the contract if they didn't meet deadline." She showed me an email. "Robert to James, I'm documenting my objections. If someone gets hurt because you're cutting corners, I won't be complicit." James's response, "You're being paranoid." The inspector cleared it. "We move forward or we lose everything." 3 days later, Melissa continued, her voice flat. "My father fell 40 feet because the scaffolding James refused to reinforce collapsed. He died instantly. OSHA investigated, found violations, but somehow the inspector's reports got altered. James paid my mother to sign an NDA. Made the whole thing go away. So you fabricated an affair." "I fabricated the affair because I wanted him to feel what we felt. Betrayed. Humiliated. Watching his family fall apart while everyone whispered about what kind of man he really was." Her eyes were hard. "I wanted his wife to hate him. His kids to be ashamed. His business to collapse. The same way mine did. Your father died. That's not the same as. My father died because your husband valued money over safety. Then he covered it up. Paid us off. Moved on to build that beautiful house you live in while my mother drank herself to death trying to cope." Melissa's voice cracked. So yes, I faked an affair. I made you think he was cheating. I wanted to destroy him the way he destroyed us. I looked at the evidence covering her wall, at this young woman whose grief had calcified into rage, and asked the question I'd been avoiding. Did James know the scaffolding was unsafe? Read the emails. He knew. He chose the deadline over the fix. She met my eyes. Your husband killed my father, Mrs. Morrison. And you get to decide if he deserves what I'm doing to him. I left with copies of everything, my hands shaking, her words echoing in my head. James knew. He chose the deadline over the fix. And I had to go home and ask him if it was true. I waited until the kids were asleep before I walked into the guest room where James had been staying for the past week. He looked up from his laptop, hope flickering across his face. Rachel. Olivia's real name is Melissa Hartley, I said, closing the door. She's Robert Hartley's daughter. Your former business partner. The man who died at the Prescott Building site 5 years ago. The hope died. His face went carefully blank, the expression he used in difficult client meetings. I remember Robert's death. It was tragic. A terrible accident. Was it? I moved closer, holding the folder Melissa had given me. Because she has emails. Safety complaints. Documentation that he wanted to halt construction because the scaffolding wasn't safe. That you refused. Rachel, it was a complicated project. Robert was brilliant but overly cautious. Every construction site has risks. We follow safety protocols, we have inspectors verify everything. Did the inspector verify the scaffolding that collapsed? Yes. OSHA investigated after the accident. Nothing criminal was found. It was ruled accidental. His voice was steady, practiced. I grieved for Robert. I paid his family more than I was legally required to because I felt responsible, even though I wasn't. You paid them to sign an NDA. I paid them to avoid a lengthy legal battle that would have bankrupted both our families. He stood, moving toward me. Rachel, Melissa is traumatized and looking for someone to blame. But her father's death was an accident. A horrible, tragic accident. Not negligence. Not my fault. Then why did you keep his file locked in your desk? Why hide it? I wasn't hiding it. It's confidential legal documents from a settled case. Of course I kept them secure. He reached for my hand. Melissa fabricated an affair to destroy our marriage because she's hurting and irrational. Don't let her succeed. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe the man I'd spent 15 years with wasn't capable of valuing money over a human life. But something in his defensiveness felt wrong. Let me see your files from that project. All of them. Rachel. If you have nothing to hide, show me. His jaw tightened. It's late. We can discuss this tomorrow. Now, James. Or I'm taking the kids to my sister's and you can explain to them why. He led me to his office, pulled out the Prescott Building files with movements that looked resentful. Here. Contracts, schedules, budgets. All standard. I read through them while he watched. Found the inspector's reports Melissa had mentioned. Everything looked clean, scaffolding approved, safety protocols met, signatures from both the inspector and James. Too clean. These reports are dated 2 days before Robert fell. But Melissa has emails from Robert sent the day before his death, still raising concerns. How did the inspector approve something Robert was still objecting to? Robert objected to everything near the end. He was having personal issues, becoming paranoid about safety. The inspector did his job properly. I pulled out my phone, compared the inspector's signature on James's reports to copies Melissa had shown me of earlier inspections. They didn't match. James. These signatures are different. What? That's. He grabbed the papers, studied them. Color drained from his face. I didn't. The inspector must have. Must have what? Forged his own signature. He sat down heavily. The project was hemorrhaging money. We were going to lose everything. Robert wanted to halt construction for weeks, replace scaffolding that would have cost. He stopped himself. Cost more than his life? That's not what I meant. Rachel, I didn't know. Didn't know what? That the scaffolding would collapse? Or didn't know that someone altered these reports after Robert died to cover up that you'd ignored his warnings? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. There's more, isn't there? I said quietly. Show me what else you're hiding. Rachel, please. But I was already digging through his files, finding what he'd buried deepest, emails from a construction worker named Miguel Santos, threatening to go public about safety violations. A settlement agreement. Another NDA. Hush money paid 3 months after Robert's death. You paid off a whistleblower, I breathed. I protected our family. The business. Everything we'd built. By covering up that you knew. You knew the scaffolding was unsafe, and you let Robert work on it anyway. James put his head in his hands. It was one decision. One cost-cutting choice. I thought Robert was being paranoid. I thought. You thought wrong. And a man died. I walked out of his office, out of the guest room, all the way to our bedroom where I locked the door. Melissa's fake affair had been cruel, calculated, designed to wound. But James's real crime was so much worse. And I had no idea what to do with that truth. The Facebook post went viral overnight. I'm pregnant with James Morrison's baby. His wife deserves to know the truth about the man she married. #affair, #pregnant, #homewrecker. Melissa had tagged James's company page, his business partners, 3 of his major clients. By morning, it had been shared 200 times. By afternoon, the local parenting groups had picked it up, dissecting our marriage with the gleeful cruelty of people who'd never liked that we could afford the house on Birchwood Lane anyway. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. James's mother, what is happening? People are asking me if my son is having an affair. My sister, Jesus, Rachel. Is it true? Colleagues from work, calling with that careful concern that meant they were already distancing themselves from the scandal. I turned my phone off and tried to pretend the world wasn't imploding. Emma came home from school at 3:30, her eyes red and swollen. Everyone's talking about Dad, she said, dropping her backpack like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Jenna asked if Dad's girlfriend is having a boy or a girl. Sophie's mom wouldn't let me come over for a playdate anymore. I pulled her close, feeling her shake with sobs against my shoulder. Baby, it's complicated. The woman isn't. Everyone thinks Dad cheated on you. Everyone thinks our family is fake. She pulled away, her face furious through the tears. Is it true? Did Dad have an affair? No. The affair isn't real. But there are other things. I stopped myself. What could I tell her? Your father didn't cheat, but he might have caused a man's death. It's adult stuff. We're handling it. It doesn't feel like you're handling it. It feels like everything's falling apart. She ran upstairs, slammed her door. I heard Tyler's game pause, heard him follow her, heard their muffled voices through the walls, my children trying to make sense of a scandal that wasn't even real while the real scandal stayed buried in their father's locked files. My boss called at 4. "Rachel, we need to talk about the optics of this situation. The affair is fabricated. It's not real." That may be true, but the social media post has been shared over 1,000 times. Clients are asking questions. The board is concerned about association. A pause. "We're going to need you to take a leave of absence while this gets sorted out. You're suspending me because of a lie someone posted online? We're protecting the company's reputation. Once you've resolved this privately, we can discuss your return." They hung up before I could argue. At 6, the school called. Tyler had been in a fight. Could I come pick him up from the principal's office? I found my 13-year-old son with a split lip and defiant eyes, the other boy's parents already there demanding suspension. "He called Dad a cheater," Tyler said flatly. "Said our whole family was trash. So I hit him." The principal looked at me with barely concealed pity. "Mrs. Morrison, I understand this is a difficult time, but violence isn't acceptable. My son defended his father's honor against a bully, and you want to suspend him?" The other boy was simply asking questions based on public information. Public lies. But even as I said it, I knew how it sounded. Desperate. Defensive. Exactly like someone whose husband really was having an affair. James was waiting when we got home, his face haggard. "We need to sue her. Defamation. Harassment. We take Melissa down legally and end this." "And what happens during discovery?" I asked quietly. "When her lawyers subpoena all your files from the Prescott building? When they depose you about Robert Hartley's death? When everything you've been hiding comes out in court documents?" His face went pale. "We can settle before it gets that far. She doesn't want money, James. She wants you destroyed. And suing her gives her exactly what she needs, a legal platform to expose what you did." Tyler looked between us, confused. "What did Dad do?" "Nothing," James said quickly. "Your mother is. Your father made a mistake 5 years ago. A serious one. And Melissa is the daughter of the man who got hurt." I met James's eyes. "We're not suing. We're fixing this a different way." "What different way?" James demanded. "She's destroying us." "You destroyed her family first," I said. "Maybe you deserve this." The words hung in the air like an execution. Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, listening. Tyler stared at his father with dawning realization. James looked at me like I'd just driven a knife into his back. "I'm trying to protect our family," he said. "So am I replied. "Even if it means protecting them from you." I walked upstairs past my daughter, locked myself in our bedroom, and tried to figure out how to save my children from the war between their father's guilt and a dead man's daughter's revenge. And came up empty. James left for Chicago on a Wednesday morning, some emergency with a project that couldn't wait. I watched his car pull out of the driveway and felt relieved to have the house to myself for 2 days. The kids were at school. I was working from home, or pretending to, since my leave of absence was really a suspension waiting to become termination. I was on my 3rd cup of coffee when I heard it. Movement upstairs. In James's office. My first thought was burglary. My second was to grab my phone and call 911. My third thought, as I climbed the stairs with my hands shaking, was that I already knew who it was. Melissa didn't look up when I appeared in the doorway. She was sitting at James's desk, surrounded by files pulled from drawers I didn't even know existed, methodically photographing each page with her phone. You're breaking and entering, I said. You left the back door unlocked. I'm just visiting. She held up a document. Looking for evidence your husband destroyed? Don't worry. I found copies. He kept everything, like insurance. Or guilt. I should have called the police. Should have demanded she leave. Instead, I walked into the room and looked at what she'd spread across his desk. Original OSHA reports, before they were altered. Side-by-side comparisons showing how signatures had been forged, dates changed, violations erased. Emails between James and the inspector, discussing payment amounts and modified findings. Your husband prioritized profit over safety, Melissa said, her voice clinical now, detached. My father complained. Sent formal written objections. James ignored every single one. Then Dad died because the scaffolding James refused to reinforce collapsed. She pulled out an envelope I'd never seen, opened it with careful hands. Inside were photos I wished I'd never seen. The accident scene. Twisted metal. Emergency responders. And Robert Hartley's body, broken on the concrete 40 feet below the scaffolding that had given way. He fell at 9:37 a.m. on a Tuesday, Melissa continued. By noon, James was on the phone with his lawyer. By Friday, the OSHA reports were altered. By the following month, my mother had signed an NDA in exchange for blood money that James called a settlement. She stood, walking around the office with the ease of someone who'd studied every inch of it. My mother drank herself to death within 2 years. Couldn't live with the guilt of taking money to stay quiet about my father's preventable death. I was 21, just graduated college, and suddenly I was alone. No father. No mother. Just this, she gestured at the files. Evidence that the man who killed them both was building a beautiful life. Her hand swept toward the window, encompassing our home, our yard, the neighborhood we'd saved for years to afford. While you were raising your kids in this house, I was burying my mother next to my father. While your husband was coaching Little League and attending PDA meetings, I was reading his sealed settlement agreement and realizing he'd gotten away with murder. Her voice finally cracked. So yes, I fabricated an affair. I wanted your children to be ashamed of their father. I wanted your neighbors to whisper. I wanted him to lose everything the way I did. So you made me think my husband was cheating. I made you dig into who he really is. And now you know. James Morrison values money over human life. He covered up safety violations that killed my father. He paid off witnesses. He altered evidence. And then he moved on like it never happened. She gathered the files, stacking them with precision. I'm not taking these. You already know where they are. You already know what he did. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Why break in now? Because he's in Chicago meeting with the same inspector he paid off 5 years ago. David Chen. They're discussing the Riverside project, the one that's been consuming your husband for months. Want to guess if history's repeating itself? She walked past me toward the door, paused. I'll be downstairs waiting when you call the police. Or you can let me leave, go through those files, and decide if your husband deserves protecting. I stood in James's office, surrounded by evidence of his guilt, and realized Melissa had given me a choice. Protect the man I married. Or protect the truth. The files sat on his desk like an accusation. And downstairs, I could hear Melissa's footsteps, patient and steady, waiting for me to decide which kind of wife I was going to be. James's Uber pulled into the driveway at 8 p.m. on Thursday to find 2 police cruisers parked outside our house. I watched his face through the window, confusion shifting to panic as he saw the officers on our porch, saw me standing with them holding a restraining order application, saw Melissa sitting in her car down the street documenting everything on her phone. "Mr. Morrison?" The taller officer stepped forward. "We need to speak with you about a protective order filed by Melissa Hartley." "What?" "I don't even know." He stopped when he saw my expression. "Rachel, what's happening?" "She's filed a restraining order claiming you threatened her," I said. "Claiming you've been harassing her since she exposed the affair. She has documentation. Witnesses who'll testify you've been following her, calling her, threatening to ruin her life." "That's insane. I've never." "She also has 5 years of documentation about Robert Hartley's death. About altered safety reports. About the inspector you bribed. About the whistleblower you paid off." My voice was steady, clinical. "So before these officers take you in for questioning about the restraining order, I need you to tell me the truth. All of it. Right here. Right now." Emma and Tyler were at my sister's. I'd made sure of that before I'd called the police about the break-in that I'd then decided not to report, choosing instead to let Melissa file her strategically timed restraining order. James looked at the officers, at me, at Melissa's car documenting his humiliation. "Can we do this inside?" "No," I said. "Here. Now. In front of witnesses. No more locked files. No more buried settlements. The truth, James." Something in him broke. I watched it happen, the careful mask crumbling, the defensive walls collapsing. He sat down on our porch steps like his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. "There were safety concerns on the Prescott building," he said quietly. "Robert wanted to halt construction, retrofit the entire scaffolding system. It would have cost $300,000 and blown our deadline by 6 weeks. We'd lose the contract, probably the business." I thought he was being paranoid. He was always cautious, always worried, always seeing worst-case scenarios that never happened. "Except one did happen," I said. "I had the inspector, encouraged, to approve the site as is. Paid him to overlook Robert's objections." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Then Robert fell. The officers were recording this. I could see their body cameras, red lights blinking. Melissa was recording. Mrs. Peterson 3 houses down was probably recording from her window." "Was it an accident?" I asked. "The scaffolding collapsed. That part was an accident. But it collapsed because I knew it needed reinforcement and chose not to do it. I knew Robert was right, and I decided the budget mattered more than the fix." He looked up at me, his face destroyed. "I told myself the odds of failure were low. That Robert was overreacting. That we'd be fine. And when he died, I panicked. Called my lawyer. He said we could minimize liability if we acted fast, alter the reports, settle with the family, make it go away before it became criminal." James pressed his palms against his eyes. "I told myself I was protecting our family. Protecting you and Emma and Tyler from losing everything. But I was protecting myself. From responsibility. From consequences. From admitting I'd valued money over a man's life." One of the officers cleared his throat. "Mr. Morrison, you're aware this is being recorded?" "I don't care anymore." James looked at me. "I'm tired of lying. Tired of hiding. Tired of pretending I didn't make a choice that killed someone." He turned to where Melissa sat in her car. "Your father was right. The scaffolding wasn't safe. I ignored him because acknowledging he was right would have cost me money. And he died because of my choice. Melissa got out of her car, walked slowly toward us. Her face was wet with tears. My mother drank herself to death, she said. Because she couldn't live with taking your money to stay silent. I know. I'm sorry. It's not enough, but I'm sorry. The officers looked at each other. We're going to need you to come to the station for questioning. About the restraining order and these other allegations. James stood. I understand. He looked at me one last time before they led him to the cruiser. I love you. I love our kids. And I'm sorry I made you choose between protecting me and protecting the truth. I'm not protecting you, I said. I'm protecting them. From the man you chose to be. They put him in the back of the police car. Melissa watched from our yard, her revenge finally complete but looking more broken than vindicated. And I stood on the porch of the house we'd built on blood money and buried lies, wondering how I was going to explain to my children that their father wasn't a cheater. He was something so much worse. I found Catherine Hartley's address through the settlement documents in James's files. She lived in a small ranch house in Bridgeport, the kind of neighborhood we'd left behind when James's business took off. The woman who answered the door looked older than her 53 years, worn down by grief I recognized even before I knew its full weight. Mrs. Hartley? I'm Rachel Morrison. James Morrison's wife. Her face hardened. I have nothing to say to you or your husband. I'm not here for him. I'm here because your daughter fabricated an affair to destroy my marriage, and in the process, made me look into my husband's files. Made me find the truth about what happened to your husband. I held out the folder containing everything, original OSHA reports, altered documents, James's confession recorded by police body cameras. I think you deserve to have this. To decide what to do with it. Not Melissa. Not me. You. She stared at the folder like it might bite. Why would you give this to me? Because my husband took your husband from you. Then he paid you to stay quiet about it. And I can't, my voice broke. I can't live in a house built on that. I can't raise my children on blood money. You deserved better than a settlement and an NDA. You deserved the truth. Catherine took the folder with shaking hands. Thank you. 6 weeks later, she filed a civil suit seeking to void the original settlement and hold James accountable for wrongful death through negligence and fraud. The local paper picked it up first. Then the state news. Then the construction industry publications that had once featured James as a rising star. His clients left within days. The Riverside project was canceled mid-construction. Business partners distanced themselves. His firm collapsed in less than a month. We lost the house by August. Couldn't make the mortgage payments without James's income, and no bank would restructure for someone facing a lawsuit that size. The beautiful home on Birchwood Lane sold at a loss to cover debts we hadn't known were accumulating. Emma and Tyler had to leave their private school. We moved to a rental house in a neighborhood where no one knew us, where my children could rebuild without everyone whispering about their father. Most of our friends disappeared. Couldn't be associated with the scandal. Couldn't risk their own reputations. The playdates stopped. The dinner invitations dried up. We became the family people avoided at the grocery store. But Melissa's revenge came with its own price. Someone leaked her fake affair scheme to the press, the fabricated text messages, the staged photos, the calculated harassment. Grieving daughter's elaborate revenge plot, read the headline, alongside photos of her wall of obsession in her apartment. Her credibility evaporated. Even as James's guilt was confirmed, her methods were condemned. The grief counseling practice she'd built collapsed when clients realized she'd exploited their vulnerability to target James through his connections. She faced potential charges for harassment, fraud, breaking and entering. Both families destroyed, one by death and corporate negligence, one by lies and revenge. I met with Catherine Hartley one more time, in a coffee shop neither of us could really afford anymore. "I'm sorry," I said. "For what my husband did. For what it cost you." "I'm sorry too," she replied. "That Melissa dragged your children into this. They didn't deserve what she put them through. Neither did your husband. He was trying to keep people safe. He was." She looked at the settlement check James's lawyers had just delivered, larger than the first, but still inadequate. "This doesn't bring him back." "No. It doesn't. But at least everyone knows now what kind of man James Morrison really is. What choosing profit over safety costs." She stood, gathering her things. "Tell your children I'm sorry they had to learn that lesson about their father. But better they know now than discover it later when the stakes are even higher." I went home to our small rental, to Emma and Tyler doing homework at a kitchen table that used to be in our breakfast nook but now served as our entire dining area. "Mom?" Emma asked. "Is Dad going to jail?" "No. The statute of limitations ran out on criminal charges. But he's paying for what he did in other ways." "Good," Tyler said fiercely. "He should pay." Emma was quieter. "Do you still love him?" I thought about that question, the one I'd been asking myself for weeks. "I love who I thought he was. I'm trying to figure out if I can love who he actually is. What's the difference? Who I thought he was would never choose money over someone's life. Who he actually is did. And then lied about it for 5 years. That's not love," Emma said. "That's just staying." My 12-year-old daughter, somehow wiser than I'd been at 38. "You're right," I said. "It is." That night, I filed for separation. Not divorce yet, I wasn't ready for that finality. But separation. Space to figure out if the man James was trying to become could ever make amends for the man he'd been. The house was gone. The money was gone. The life we'd built was gone. But my children were learning accountability. Truth. The difference between staying and loving. And maybe, I thought, that was worth more than the beautiful lie we'd been living. Or maybe it was just all we had left. 6 months after everything exploded, I sat in a modest auditorium watching Emma perform in her new school's winter concert. The venue was nothing like Westbridge Academy's grand hall with its vaulted ceilings and professional lighting. This was a converted gymnasium with folding chairs and a sound system that crackled when the volume peaked. But Emma was smiling as she played, really smiling, in a way I hadn't seen at her old school where every performance felt like an audition for status. James sat beside me. We'd come together, not as a couple, but as parents who'd learned the hard way that some things mattered more than grudges. He lived in a studio apartment across town, working as a project manager for someone else's firm at a fraction of his former salary. His reputation in the construction world was destroyed. No one wanted to hire the man who'd cut corners that killed someone, no matter how much time had passed. We were separated. Not divorced. I couldn't decide which direction I was headed. Across the aisle, I spotted Catherine Hartley with a man I didn't recognize, his arm around her shoulders. She caught my eye and nodded, not friendly, but not hostile either. Acknowledging. She'd won her lawsuit, gotten enough to secure her future, pay off her mortgage, build something stable from the ashes. It wouldn't bring Robert back, but it was more than the hush money James had given her the first time. Melissa was absent. I'd heard she'd moved to Portland months ago, trying to outrun the person revenge had made her. We'd met one final time, in a coffee shop where we both looked exhausted. Did it help? I'd asked. Destroying him? She'd stared into her untouched latte. No. My father's still dead. And I made your children hate me. I became the villain in their story. You were already the villain in your own, I'd replied. Grief made you cruel. But what James did made that possible. She'd left without drinking her coffee, and I hadn't seen her since. In therapy last week, I'd told Dr. Brennan I didn't know if I could forgive James. He didn't cheat, but what he did was worse. He valued money over a man's life. How do I love someone who could make that choice? By acknowledging he made it, that it was wrong, and that he's spending the rest of his life trying to make amends that will never be enough, she'd replied. Love doesn't mean excusing. It means witnessing. The concert ended to enthusiastic applause. Emma took her bow, found us in the crowd, waved. Tyler stood and cheered, embarrassing his sister the way brothers do. In the parking lot afterward, Emma asked the question she'd been asking for months. Are you and Dad getting back together? I looked at James, this man I'd spent 15 years building a life with, who destroyed that life through choices he couldn't unmake, who was trying every day to become someone different than he'd been. I don't know yet, sweetheart. We're working on it. Tyler added, but we're still a family, right? Even if it looks different? Yes, I said firmly. We're still a family. Just a more honest one. We walked to our separate cars, James to his studio apartment where he lived alone with his guilt, me and the kids to the rental house that cost half what our mortgage used to but felt more like home than Birchwood Lane ever had. It wasn't the life I'd imagined at 25 when I'd married James, thinking we'd build something perfect together. It wasn't the life I'd been protecting when I ignored warning signs because acknowledging them meant facing hard truths. But it was real. Messy and painful and complicated and real. Emma was laughing at something Tyler said, her breath fogging in the December air. My children, who'd lost their beautiful house and their private school and their father's reputation, but who'd gained something harder to quantify, the knowledge that truth matters more than comfort, that accountability matters more than appearances, that family can survive even when it breaks. Maybe that was worth more than the beautiful lie we'd been living on Birchwood Lane. Or maybe it was just all there is when everything explodes, the pieces that remain, the people still standing, the choice to keep trying even when the trying hurts. I unlocked our car, watched James drive away in his 15-year-old sedan, and thought about Dr. Brennan's words. Love doesn't mean excusing. It means witnessing. I was witnessing. Every day. The man James had been, the man he was trying to become, the gap between them that might never fully close. Whether witnessing would be enough, I didn't know. But for now, in this moment, with my children laughing in the back seat and a modest rental house waiting for us, it was what I had. And some days, that had to be enough. Sometimes the truth doesn't just set you free, it shatters everything first. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss what happens when love, lies, and revenge collide.